After the European Union hit the company with a fine of nearly $2 billion for antitrust violations over its music streaming apps, Apple said it plans to appeal that decision. Now, this comes as Apple CEO Tim Cook is also facing some heat from investors for lagging behind its peers when it comes to AI investing. Here to weigh in on all of this is Gene Munster, managing partner at Deepwater Asset Management. Gene, thank you very much for joining us as always. We always turn to you for all things Apple. So take us through what exactly this all means for Apple and whether or not there is a bull case to be had at current levels for valuation.
Well, what it means for Apple in the near term is investors are voting that they don't have confidence in Apple's AI strategy. And that's understandable, of course, because it's just been over the past couple months that we've heard more about that. And ultimately, when you think about their AI strategy, it really comes down to how are they going to make money on this? And investors now are generally on the same page that this June at WWDC, we're going to see them come out with their first foundation model. As a reminder, this would compete with GPT, it would compete with Gemini, Anthropic, X.AI. This is one of the kind of top 4 or 5, Llama from Meta. Really important that they have that, so that's one piece. Coming out with that model still doesn't answer the fundamental question that investors are asking, again, which is what does this mean for the business? And I'm going to fill in some of those blanks, is that what it means for their business, of course, they will use AI to make better predictive text and add kind of the fit and finish around their hardware and software, like some of the Macs that they've announced today. But more importantly, this is an opportunity that they come out with a subscription for personalized AI. And I think this is one of the big unlocks for consumer value in AI. And essentially, it is a unique place that Apple has because of their role with privacy and security and the trust that they have with consumers. People will be willing to let Apple use their data, opt in, to allow these AI bots to do tasks for them. Contact your utility company, book a trip, compose emails. There's a lot that can be done. And when I think about that opportunity, it comes down to a subscription business. And if you look at their active install base of devices, that's something that they're really clear about. That's 2.2 billion, growing about 8% a year. They don't give out the active user number. I estimate that that's about 1.4 billion. But if 20% of that 1.4 billion would opt in for a $10 a month personalized AI service, so it's going to take a few years to get there, that would add over 15% to Apple's earnings. And so, Dom, when you put all of this together, understandable investors' reaction, but I think investors are forgetting that there are almost 5 billion people that live their lives throughout the day on Apple devices. That stickiness is a huge long-term opportunity for them to sell AI products into.
Gene, I do have a question about this EU fine. I understand it's $2 billion as of now, but that there's a high likelihood that Apple will appeal. Let's say worst case scenario, it doesn't work. They have to pay the $2 billion fine. Was it worth it? I mean, Apple has a pretty big cash pile. Was it worth it for the business perhaps it did get, even if it believes that it got it fair and square, for the revenue that it has acquired in the EU?
So the $2 billion, I agree. I think it's probably going to be more like $1 billion after everything is said and done. It'll take a year. It's 3% of their cash at the $2 billion level. I think the bigger question for me is what impact is these type of fines going to have on Apple's App Store revenue globally? And on their last earnings call, they talked about that the App Store in Europe was 7% of total App Store revenue. So that basically equates to 0.5% of Apple's overall revenue. So they knew that this was coming, these changes were coming, that this fine potentially was coming, and they wanted to get in front of investors and remind them how small of a piece that this is. But it does not change the bigger question, is that there will be changes coming to Apple's App Store across the board. And this is probably 40% of Apple's earnings come from services more broadly. And so I think when I think about that dynamic, they'll eventually pay the fine. And what really sticks out, and I've been closely watching what's happened in Canada, the U.S., South Korea, Japan, the EU in terms of all these changes. Apple is really smart in terms of how they navigate this. They will go and make changes to accommodate the courts, but then they find ways to essentially charge the developers anyway. And I suspect that that will frustrate and infuriate some developers, but at the end of the day, they're building huge businesses off of Apple's backbone. And I think despite their frustrations, they will continue to pay, and Apple will actually maintain better economics for their App Store over the next 5 years than I think what investors are expecting.
To recap, Apple gets a fine of nearly $2 billion over Apple Music's relationship with Spotify. Apple's down about 3% today over investors losing confidence over slow AI review. Apple's first foundational model should come out in June. They're saying this is going to be the biggest announcement since the iPhone, so this should be big. They could come out with a subscription model also of personalized AI, which would be sticky and lucrative for the business. Apple has about 2.2 billion active devices, growing about 8% per year. They have about 1.5 billion daily active users. That's a lot of people to flip the switch on when they get this AI figured out and be able to charge revenue for it. There will be a lot of changes coming to the App Store across the board, but Apple's really smart. They're going to figure out a way to please the courts and figure out a way to still charge. Apple is starting to look pretty compelling down here at 175 and lower, guys. I'm putting some money to work on the dips, and I think it's just getting more and more compelling as it goes lower. This is a great company, and we've seen that they don't have to be first to be the best. I think they'll come around and they'll be right at the top. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Catch you in the next one.